The great ship drifted in the darkness of space, its once shiny hull now scarred with the marks of battle. Inside, the ship's command center buzzed with nervous activity. The room was filled with the soft blue glow of screens showing maps of nearby star systems. Crew members with forearms and pale skin rushed back and forth, their movements quick with fear. Admiral Tark stood at the center of it all. His uniform, once a symbol of pride in the mighty Vorn collective, now hung loosely on his thin frame. The war had taken its toll on everyone. He looked at the largest screen, which showed the positions of enemy ships. Too many red dots, moving, closer every day. "How many ships do we have left?" Tark asked, his voice low. Officer Mel, who had served with Tark for 20 years, checked his datapad. He hesitated before answering. "Just 5 battle-ready ships, Admiral. The rest are damaged." Or, Mel didn't finish the sentence. They both knew. Destroyed. Thousands of crew members lost to the cold emptiness of space. Tark nodded slowly. 5 ships against the Krill Dominion's fleet of hundreds. The Vorn collective, once the proud rulers of 50 star systems, now clung to just their home planet and 3 small colony worlds. "The Council wants an update, sir," said Mel. "They're waiting for your call." Tark sighed. The High Council, safe in their underground bunkers on the Vorn homeworld, still believed they could win this war, or at least they pretended to believe. It made giving orders to die easier. The call was brief and tense. The Council head, an old Vorn with gray skin, looked out from the screen with cold eyes. "The Krill forces have destroyed our defense station in the outer system," Tark reported. "They will reach our homeworld in 30 days. We cannot stop them with our remaining ships." The Council head's 4 eyes blinked one after another, a sign of deep stress in Vorn body language. "Then what do you suggest, Admiral? Surrender? To those who have sworn to wipe our kind from the galaxy?" Tark took a deep breath. "There is one option we haven't tried. The archives mention a species from a small system in the spiral arm. They call themselves humans. Their world is what our scientists call a death world, high gravity, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife. Yet they not only survived, but thrived." The Council head looked doubtful. "Deathworlders? Are they even spacefaring?" "Yes," said Tark. "They've been exploring beyond their system for about 50 of their years. They're new to the galactic stage, but our records show they respond to distress calls. They have a concept they call honor that compels them to help others in danger. Or, they might just kill us themselves," muttered one of the other Council members off-screen. The Council head waved a hand to silence the comment. "What do these humans have that the Krill don't? The Krill outmatch us in ships, weapons, and numbers." Tark looked down at his notes. "Humans evolved on a world 3 times the gravity of ours. Their bodies are dense, strong. They can survive in environments that would kill most species in minutes. And they think differently. They're problem solvers by nature, always finding new ways to overcome challenges." After a long silence, the Council head nodded. "Send your distress call. Admiral, but be careful what you tell these humans. They don't need to know everything about our history with the Krill." The call ended, leaving Tark staring at a blank screen. Officer Mel approached cautiously. "Sir, is this wise? The archives also mention that humans are highly protective of weaker species. If they learn about our harvesting operations..." Tark turned to face his second-in-command. "They won't learn about that. We'll tell them only what they need to know. That we're victims of aggression, that we need help. We'll offer them technology, resources, things they can't refuse. And when they've helped us defeat the Krill..." A small smile crossed Tark's face. "Then we study them, learn how they survived on their death world, add their strengths to our own. The human homeworld would make an excellent new colony once we understand how to adapt to its conditions." Mel didn't look convinced. "The records warn that humans are dangerous when betrayed. They hold grudges, they seek revenge. They're just one species from one small planet," Tark said dismissively. "Once they've served their purpose, we'll deal with them like we've dealt with dozens of other useful species." In the ship's communication center, technicians prepared the distress signal. It would be broadcast on all frequencies used by human ships, formatted to be readable by their systems. The message was carefully crafted. To the species of Sol III. We, the Vorn Collective, request immediate military assistance. Our civilization faces extinction at the hands of aggressive forces. We offer advanced technology and abundant resources in exchange for your intervention. We appeal to your sense of justice and honor. Tark reviewed the message and nodded his approval. Send it. With a press of a button, the signal shot out into the darkness of space, racing at light speed toward the small blue planet that the Vorn had mostly ignored until now. What none of the Vorn understood was just how different humans were from other species they had encountered. Humans hadn't just survived on their death world. They had been shaped by it. Every human carried the legacy of ancestors who had outthought predators, who had created tools to overcome stronger enemies, who had banded together to face threats as a group, and perhaps most dangerous of all, humans had evolved a keen sense for detecting lies. A sixth sense for when something wasn't quite right, a natural suspicion of deals that seemed too good to be true. 3 days later, the response came. A simple message. Distress call received. Human vessel UES Defender responding. Coordinates. For rendezvous requested. Tark's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in excitement as he read the message. See, he said to Mel. They responded exactly as the archives predicted. They can't resist helping those in need. I hope you're right, sir. Melly, replied, his voice quiet. For all our sakes. Tark didn't notice the doubt in his officer's voice. He was too busy planning how to present their situation to these humans, what to tell them, what to hide, and how to use them to save the Vorn Collective. As the human ship changed course to meet them, Tark reviewed what little information the Vorn had on humans. Strong, resourceful, compassionate toward the weak. He failed to notice another important trait mentioned in the archives. Humans were relentless when hunting those who preyed on others. The trap was set, but Tark didn't realize that he might not be the hunter in this situation. He might be the prey. Captain Jack Wilson was enjoying his first cup of coffee when the alert sounded. The bitter liquid sloshed in his mug as he turned toward the communication officer. What is it, Tom? He asked. Lieutenant Tom Baker looked up from his screen, his eyes wide. Sir, we've received a distress call from non-human origin. The bridge of the UES Defender went quiet. In the 5 years since humans had joined the Galactic community, they had met 12 alien species. Some were friendly, some were not. But this was the first time they had received a direct call for help. Wilson set down his coffee and moved to Baker's station. Show me. The message from the Vorn Collective played on the screen. Wilson read it twice, his face serious. Wake up Dr. Parker and her team, he ordered, and plot a course to these coordinates. The Defender wasn't a large ship by military standards. At 300 meters long, it carried a crew of 120 and was built for speed and versatility rather than raw power. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in technology. The ship was a perfect example of human engineering, practical, adaptable, and tougher than it looked. Dr. Emily Parker arrived on the bridge 20 minutes later, her dark hair still messy from sleep. As the ship's chief diplomat and xenobiologist, she would be essential for first contact. What do we know about these Vorn? She asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Wilson. Not much, Wilson admitted. They're not one of the species we've had direct contact with, but our database has some basic information. He pulled up an image on the main screen, a tall, thin alien with 4 arms and pale skin. Large eyes dominated a narrow face. The Vorn Collective controls about 20 star systems in the Orion Arm, Wilson explained. They're an old civilization, at least 5,000 years of spaceflight, generally considered neutral in galactic politics. Dr. Parker frowned. And who are they at war with? That's where it gets interesting, Wilson said. They mention aggressive forces but don't name their enemy. I want to know more before we commit to anything. The Defender traveled for 2 days at maximum speed before reaching the rendezvous point. The crew used that time to prepare. Security. Teams ran drills, diplomats studied Vorn culture, and engineers made sure the ship was ready for anything. When they arrived, everyone stared at the viewscreen in silence. The Vorn ship was enormous, at least 5 times the size of the Defender. Its hull was decorated with intricate patterns that glowed faintly blue against the black metal. "Impressive," Wilson murmured. Lieutenant Anna Reed, the ship's intelligence officer, stood beside him, her arms crossed. "Too impressive for a supposedly desperate civilization," she said quietly. Wilson nodded slightly. Reed had good instincts. He made a mental note to have her at the first meeting. "Open a channel," he ordered. The face of Admiral Tark appeared on screen. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he spoke. "Captain Wilson of Earth, the Vorn Collective is grateful for your quick response to our call for aid." Wilson kept his expression neutral. "We're always ready to help those in need, Admiral. But before we can discuss assistance, we need to understand the situation. Would it be possible for our diplomatic team to come aboard your vessel?" Tark hesitated, just for a second. "Of course. We welcome you and your team." An hour later, Wilson led a small group onto the Vorn ship. Dr. Parker walked on his right, with Lieutenant Reed and 2 security officers following. The Vorn vessel's interior was as impressive as its exterior. High ceilings, elegant design, and technology that seemed almost artistic. Admiral Tark greeted them personally along with Officer Mel and 2 other Vorn officials. They led the humans to a large meeting room with an oval table. "Please sit," Tark said. "Can we offer you refreshments?" Wilson smiled politely. "Thank you, but we'll decline for now. Our bodies process alien substances differently." This was true, but it was also standard procedure. Never eat or drink anything during first contact. It was one of the basic rules taught at the academy. Once everyone was seated, Tark activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a map of Vorn territory, with red markers indicating attacked systems. "The Krill Dominion began their assault 6 months ago," Tark explained. "Without warning, without provocation, they have destroyed 17 of our worlds and killed billions of our people." Dr. Parker leaned forward. "The Krill? I don't believe we have any information about them in our database." "They are a secretive coalition," Tark said. "Aggressive, unwilling to communicate. They simply attack and destroy." Wilson watched Tark carefully as he spoke. The Admiral's upper arms remained still while his lower arms moved constantly, adjusting his uniform, touching the table, never quite at rest. "What started this conflict?" Wilson asked. Tark's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "Resource disputes, ancient territorial claims, the usual causes of war." Lieutenant Reed made a small note on her pad. Wilson knew what she was thinking. Tark's answer was vague, too general. Not the response of someone who had watched billions of his people die for specific reasons. "And what sort of assistance are you looking for from Earth?" Wilson asked. "Your ships are small but reportedly very effective," Tark said. "Your soldiers are known to be exceptionally strong and adaptable, with even a small human fleet supporting our remaining forces. We could hold the Krill back long enough to negotiate peace." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. However, Earth policy requires us to have all available information before committing military forces. We would need to speak with representatives of the Krill Dominion as well." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Tark's pale skin flushed slightly blue. Anger or fear, Wilson couldn't tell which. "That would be unwise," Tark said slowly. "The Krill do not negotiate. They do not communicate, they only destroy." Wilson kept his face neutral. "Nevertheless, it's our policy. We can't take sides in a conflict without hearing from all parties involved." Tark's forearms moved in what might have been the Vorn equivalent of a shrug. "Of course, I understand. Your species is young in galactic terms. Cautious, but I assure you, attempting to contact the Krill will only delay the help we desperately need." The meeting continued for another hour, with Tark showing images of destroyed Vorn colonies and describing the Krill's brutal tactics. It was a convincing presentation. But as the human team returned to their shuttle, Wilson noticed that Reed was unusually quiet. "What's on your mind, Lieutenant?" he asked once they were alone in the shuttle. Reed looked up from her notes. "Something feels wrong, sir. Their ship is almost undamaged for a civilization on the brink of destruction. And I analyzed Tark's speech. Patterns. He showed stress indicators when talking about the causes of the war, not when describing the destruction. Wilson nodded. I noticed that too. And did you see how they reacted when I mentioned contacting the Krill? Yes, sir. Classic deception response. Wilson looked out the window at the massive Vorn vessel. Launch the probes as soon as we're back on the Defender. I want independent information about this conflict. Already prepared, sir, Reed replied. What? Admiral Tark didn't know was that humans had learned long ago to verify everything. Trust, but verify. An old Earth saying that had saved human lives countless times. The small unmanned probes would search for information that the Vorn weren't. Sharing. And Captain Wilson had a feeling they would find something important. Very important indeed. Lieutenant Anna Reed worked through the night. The data from the probes trickled in slowly, piece by piece, building a picture very different from what Admiral Tark had presented. She didn't notice the time until Captain Wilson entered the small intelligence office with 2 cups of coffee. You've been here for 10 hours straight, he said, placing a cup on her desk. Found anything? Reed rubbed her tired eyes and nodded. Yes, sir, and none of it is good. The screens around her showed maps, intercepted communications, and images of planets marked with both Vorn and Krill symbols. Wilson pulled up a chair. Show me, he said. Reed brought up the first file. This is from the 5th probe. It managed to access an abandoned Krill outpost's database. The screen showed text in an alien language translated by the ship's computer. It's a historical record. The Krill aren't one species, Captain. They're a coalition of 17 different species who banded together against the Vorn. Wilson frowned. Tark never mentioned that. Because it doesn't fit their victim story, Reed said, bringing up another file. The Krill weren't the aggressors. They were fighting back. For the next hour, Reed showed Wilson what the probes had discovered. Images of planets where the native species had been rounded up by Vorn ships. Records of harvesting operations dating back centuries. The pattern was always the same. The Vorn would find developing worlds with intelligent life, then take what they wanted: resources, technology, and people. They're farmers, Wilson said quietly, and other species are their crops. Reed nodded. The Krill formed when several victim species developed space travel and found each other. They've been working to free other worlds from Vorn control. Wilson stared at the final image, a planet called Neva, where the native bird-like species had been reduced to just a few thousand individuals, living in what could only be described as farms. Young Nevans were taken regularly for processing at Vorn facilities. And Earth? Wilson asked. Where do we fit in? Reed switched to another screen. I found this in the Vorn ship's database when they transmitted their star charts to us. She pulled up a file labeled Sol System, Potential Harvest Site. They've known about Earth for decades, she continued. They classified us as a death world species. Too dangerous to approach directly. But they've been watching us. The file includes notes about how useful our adaptability would be if they could harvest it. Wilson's face hardened. They weren't looking for allies. They were looking for new technology to steal, new traits to add to their collection. Exactly, sir, and there's more. Reed looked uncomfortable. The Vorn have developed a method to extract genetic material and certain neural patterns from other species. They use it to enhance themselves or create specialized worker drones, if they could capture even a few humans. She didn't need to finish the thought. Wilson understood. The Vorn saw humans as a valuable resource to be used, not as equals to ally with. We need to inform command immediately, Wilson said, standing up. Back on the Vorn ship, Admiral Tark was growing increasingly anxious. The humans were taking too long to decide, asking too many questions. And worse, their probes had been detected in restricted space. They know, Officer Mel said, his voice barely above a whisper. We should cut contact and leave while we can. Tark slammed all 4 hands on his desk. No, we're too close. If the Krill reach our homeworld, we're finished. We need the humans' help, or at least their technology. But if they've learned about our harvesting operations, They're just one primitive species, Tark interrupted. Their ship is tiny compared to ours. Yes, they evolved on a high-gravity world. Yes, they're physically strong, but they're still newcomers to space. They know nothing of real war. Mel didn't look convinced. The reports from our scouts say their ship is highly advanced, small but powerful, and their weapons are no match for ours, Tark finished. If they refuse to help us, we'll simply take what we need from them. Their ship, their technology, their genetic material, everything. On the Defender, Captain Wilson called a meeting in the ship's main briefing room. The officers stood at attention as he and Lieutenant Reed explained what they had discovered. The Vorn have been harvesting developing civilizations, Wilson said, his voice steady but tight with controlled anger. The Krill are a coalition of former victims who developed space travel and united against the Vorn. Commander Luis Garcia, the ship's tactical officer, frowned. So the distress call was a trap? More like a hunting expedition, Reed explained. The Vorn specifically targeted us because we're classified as Deathworlders in their database. They want to understand how we survived such harsh conditions, then use that knowledge against the Krill. Dr. Parker shook her head in disgust. And if we refuse to help? Wilson brought up an image of the Vorn ship on the main screen. Then they would likely try to take what they want by force. Their ship outguns us on paper. On paper? Garcia asked, raising an eyebrow. A small smile crossed Wilson's face. The Vorn don't understand human ships, Commander. They build for show, large, impressive vessels that look powerful. We build for function. The officers nodded in understanding. Earth ships were compact, with every system designed for maximum efficiency in the harshest conditions. What looked like empty space to alien eyes often contained backup systems, redundancies, and hidden capabilities. I've contacted Earth Command, Wilson continued. Our orders are to extract ourselves safely, establish contact with the Krill Dominion, and offer humanitarian assistance to the species being victimized. Chief Engineer Maria Torres spoke up. Sir, the Vorn are unlikely to let us leave once they realize we're not going to help them. Wilson nodded. I'm aware, Chief. That's why we're going to offer them a demonstration of why Deathworlders have a reputation in the first place. He outlined his plan quickly. The officers listened carefully, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Commander Garcia grinned. The Vorn have no idea what they've done, do they, sir? No, Commander, Wilson replied. Throughout human history, few things have united us more quickly than discovering someone who preys on the defenseless. As the meeting ended and the officers returned to their stations, Wilson remained in the briefing room, staring at the image of the Vorn ship. He had always been taught that first contact situations required patience, understanding, and diplomacy. But there were some things humans could not, would not, tolerate. The strong preying on the weak, the powerful exploiting the vulnerable. The Vorn had made a critical mistake when they targeted humanity. They had assumed that because humans came from a harsh, dangerous world, they would share the Vorn's view that might made right. That the strong could take whatever they wanted from the weak. What the Vorn failed to understand was that humans had learned a different lesson from their death world. Survival required cooperation, protection of the vulnerable, and standing together against threats. Now the Vorn were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Captain Wilson sat at his desk, carefully composing his message to Admiral Tark. Every word needed to be perfect, firm enough to make the human position clear, but diplomatic enough to avoid immediate conflict. After reading it through last time he sent it to the Vorn ship. The response came quickly. Admiral Tark requested a video call. When Tark's face appeared on the screen, Wilson could see the Vorn was struggling to control his emotions. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked rapidly and his skin had a bluish tinge that Wilson now recognized as stress. Captain Wilson, Tark began, his voice strained. I've received your message. I must say I'm confused. You're refusing to help us? Wilson kept his face neutral. Admiral, after careful consideration and research, we've determined that the conflict between the Vorn Collective and the Krill Dominion is more complex than initially presented. Earth cannot take sides in what appears to be a long-standing dispute with valid concerns on both sides. Tark's lower arms twitched. Valid concerns? The Krill are destroying our worlds, killing our people, just as the Vorn have done to many species under Krill protection, Wilson replied calmly. Our probes have gathered quite extensive data, Admiral. We know about the harvesting operations. There was a long silence. When Tark spoke again, his voice had changed. The pleading tone was gone, replaced by something colder and harder. I see. That is unfortunate. Perhaps we misjudged your species, Captain. We thought humans would understand the natural order of things. The strong survive by using the resources available to them. The weak serve their purpose by becoming those resources. Wilson's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained even. That is not our understanding of the natural order, Admiral. Humanity learned different lessons on our death world. Tark leaned forward. It doesn't matter now. Your ship will remain here, Captain. Your crew and your technology will serve the Vorn Collective, one way or another. The screen went black. Wilson immediately pressed the comm button on his desk. All stations, battle stations, initiate Plan Delta. Throughout the Defender, alarms sounded. Crew members who had been waiting for this moment rushed to their positions. In engineering, Chief Torres and her team activated systems that had been carefully prepared over the last 24 hours. In the weapons control room, Commander Garcia watched as targeting systems came online. Weapon stations confirm ready status. One by one, the weapons officers reported in, not just the standard railguns and missile systems that were visible on the ship's exterior, but the hidden defenses as well. On the bridge, Wilson took his captain's chair as Lieutenant Reed gave him a status update. The Vorn ship is powering up weapons systems, sir. They're locking targeting sensors on us. Wilson nodded. As expected. Shield status? Full power to forward shields, Reed reported. All decks report ready for Plan Delta. Wilson looked at the main view screen, which showed the massive Vorn ship. It dwarfed the Defender, its weapons ports glowing as they charged. Open a channel to the Vorn ship, Wilson ordered. Reed worked her console. Channel open, sir. Wilson spoke clearly and calmly. Admiral Tark, this is Captain Wilson. I am giving you one opportunity to stand down and release us. If you fire upon an Earth vessel, it will be considered an act of war against humanity. The response came in the form of energy beams shooting from the Vorn ship toward the Defender. Just before impact, Wilson gave the order. Execute evasive pattern Zulu 3. The Defender moved with shocking speed, accelerating at a rate that would have crushed any non-human crew. The Vorn weapons missed by meters, a complete surprise to the Vorn gunners who had never seen a ship that size move so quickly. Now, Commander Garcia, Wilson ordered. The Defender's point defense systems activated, not targeting the Vorn weapons as expected, but rather precisely hitting their external sensor arrays. The small concentrated energy pulses burned through, the delicate equipment partially blinding the much larger ship. Admiral Tark stood on his bridge, rage building as his weapons officers reported the miss. How did they move so fast, he demanded. Their ship's engines shouldn't be capable of that acceleration. Officer Mel checked the sensor readings. Sir, their ship design must include high G compensation systems beyond anything we've seen, and they're targeting our sensor arrays, not our weapons. Irrelevant, Tark snapped. Fire all forward batteries, they can't dodge forever. The Vorn ship launched a barrage of energy weapons. This time, a few grazed the Defender's shields, causing them to flare bright blue. Inside the Defender, the crew felt the impacts as minor vibrations. Captain Wilson remained calm in his chair. Damage report? Shields holding at 92%, sir, Reed reported. No hull breach. Wilson nodded. Deploy the Wasps. From the rear of the Defender, 3 smaller craft launched. Each was just 10 meters long. Tiny compared to even the human ship. Each held 4 Marines, men and women who had trained in gravity wells that would crush most alien species. The small craft shot toward the Vorn vessel, too fast and too small for the partially blinded. Targeting systems to lock onto. They reached the massive hull and attached to it at key points identified by Reed's intelligence analysis. Inside the lead WASP, Marine Captain Tom Lee addressed his team. Remember the plan. We breach, we disable their main systems, we extract. No unnecessary force, these people are misguided, not evil. The Marines nodded. Despite their anger at what the Vorn had done to other species, they were professionals. They would complete their mission cleanly. Using specialized cutting tools, they breached the Vorn hull. As the hole opened, the Marines activated their suits, strength enhancement systems, and moved inside. The Vorn security team waiting for them was completely unprepared for what they faced. The humans moved with shocking speed. Their dense muscles and reinforced bones evolved on a world with 3 times the gravity of the Vorn homeworld, giving them strength the Vorn couldn't match. Within minutes, all 3 Marine teams had secured their entry points and were moving through the ship toward their targets: the engine room, the main power core, and the bridge. On the Vorn bridge, alarms sounded as reports of intruders came from multiple decks. "How did they get aboard?" Tark demanded, panic creeping into his voice. "They've breached the hull in 3 locations, sir," a security officer reported. "Our teams can't stop them. They're too strong." Tark stared at the security feeds, in disbelief. The human soldiers moved like nothing he had ever seen, fast, coordinated, and impossibly powerful. They weren't killing the Vorn security teams, just disabling them with precise strikes and some kind of stun weapons. "Lock down the bridge," Tark ordered. "Seal all doors." On the Defender, Captain Wilson watched the operation unfold through the helmet cameras of his Marines. Everything was proceeding according to plan. "Sir," Reed reported, "I've established contact with the Krill Dominion fleet. They're 20 hours away. I've transmitted everything we've learned about the Vorn activities." Wilson nodded. "Good. And the status of Marine Team 3? Reed checked her screen. "Approaching the bridge now, sir." Admiral Tark knew he had made a terrible mistake when the bridge doors slid open despite the lockdown. 4 humans in combat. Suits stepped through, their weapons raised but not firing. Marine Captain Lee looked at the Vorn Admiral with steady eyes. "Admiral Tark, by order of Captain Wilson of the United Earthship Defender, you are now under custody for crimes against sentient species. Please surrender peacefully." Tark looked at the humans, then at his bridge crew. No one moved to defend. They had all seen what these Deathworlders could do. With a sinking feeling, Tark realized that everything he thought he knew about the natural order had been wrong. The true predators had arrived, and the Vorn were not them. 20 hours after the capture of the Vorn ship, 3 Krill vessels arrived at the rendezvous point. Captain Wilson watched from the Defender's bridge as the alien ships approached. Unlike the ornate design of the Vorn vessel, these ships were practical, with clean lines and visible weapon ports. They weren't trying to impress, they were built to fight. "Open a channel," Wilson ordered. The main screen flickered, and Wilson found himself looking at the Krill commander. The alien was shorter than a human, with gray-green skin and large eyes adapted for low light. Behind her stood officers of at least 3 different species, clear evidence of the coalition nature of the Krill Dominion. "I am Captain Wilson of the Earthship Defender. We appreciate your quick response to our message." The Krill commander inclined her head slightly. "I am Commander Nix of the Krill Defense Force. Your message was unexpected. The Vorn do not surrender." Wilson smiled slightly. "They made some miscalculations about humans." Nix's large eyes blinked slowly. "So it seems. We received the data you transmitted. Your species has our gratitude for stopping this Vorn harvesting operation before it could begin. We'd like to discuss how Earth can help with the wider situation," Wilson replied. "But first, I believe you'll want to speak with Admiral Tark." An hour later, Wilson sat in a conference room with Commander Nix and representatives from both the Krill Dominion and the Vorn Collective. Admiral Tark was there too, under guard, and looking considerably less confident than when they had first met. "The evidence is clear," Nix said, her voice firm but not vengeful. "The Vorn Collective has violated the rights of sentient beings across 17 star systems. They have harvested developing species, experimented on sentient beings, and used their genetic material without consent. Tark's four eyes focused on the table before him. He had not spoken since being brought into the room. The Krill Dominion demands immediate cessation of all harvesting operations, Nix continued. All captive species must be released and allowed to return to their homeworlds, and the Vorn must provide resources to help these species rebuild. One of the Vorn representatives, a younger admiral named Wren, spoke up. These terms are harsh. Many of our people will suffer. As our people have suffered, replied a Krill officer with feathers instead of skin, clearly from one of the species the Vorn had harvested in the past. Wilson watched the exchange carefully. This wasn't just a negotiation, it was the beginning of a profound change for both civilizations. The Vorn were facing the consequences of centuries of exploitation. The Krill were transforming from victims to victors. If I may, Wilson said, drawing everyone's attention, Earth has a long and unfortunately violent history. We've seen cycles of revenge and retribution play out many times. They rarely end well for anyone. Nix turned her large eyes toward him. What are you suggesting, Captain? Justice, not revenge, Wilson said simply. The victims deserve restoration. The Vorn need consequences. But if your goal is lasting peace, then the terms must leave room for the Vorn to rebuild too, just in a different way. The discussions continued for hours. Wilson was impressed by the restraint shown by the Krill. Despite all they had suffered, they weren't seeking to destroy the Vorn, only to end their harmful practices and create a more just relationship between the species. Finally, an agreement was reached. The Vorn would release all harvested species and provide resources for their rehabilitation. They would withdraw from certain contested territories. A joint commission would oversee the transition and ensure compliance. As the meeting ended, Admiral Tark approached Wilson under the watchful eyes of his guards. I still don't understand, Tark said quietly. You could have destroyed us, taken our technology, used our resources. Why didn't you? Wilson studied the alien carefully. Because that's what you would have done, and we are not you. Is that what you learned on your death world? Tark asked. Mercy? Wilson shook his head. We learned that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting those who need protection. It's about building things together instead of taking from each other. He turned to leave, then paused. Your message called us Deathworlders like it was something to fear. But you never understood what that really means. We didn't just survive. Our harsh world, we learned from it. Every predator, every storm, every disease taught us something. And the most important lesson was that we're stronger together than alone. 3 days later, the Defender prepared to depart. The Krill had established control over the Vorn vessel, and the first steps of the peace agreement were underway. Wilson stood on his bridge watching as the Krill ships moved into formation around the much larger Vorn ship. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Standard speed. As the Defender pulled away, Lieutenant Reed approached his chair. Sir, Earth Command has responded to our report. They're establishing a new initiative, the Interstellar Protection Force. They want you to help develop the protocols. Wilson smiled. Looks like we found our place in the galaxy. As warriors? Reed asked. As protectors, Wilson corrected. There's a difference. 6 months later, the first official Earth diplomatic mission arrived in Krill space. They brought not weapons or threats, but medical technology, agricultural sciences, and offers of cultural exchange. The coalition of former victim species welcomed them as allies and friends. On dozens of worlds, species that had lived under Vorn control for generations began the long process of rebuilding their societies. Earth advisors worked alongside Krill, experts helping these people reclaim their independence and identity. And on the former Vorn harvest worlds, a saying began to spread among the people. When trouble comes, call the Deathworlders. Because across the stars, a new understanding had emerged about humans. They weren't just physically strong because of their high-gravity world. They carried something else from their harsh planet, a fierce determination that the strong should protect the weak, not prey upon them. The Vorn's distress call had indeed been their last mistake. But it hadn't led to their destruction as they had feared. Instead, it had brought about something they had never imagined. A galaxy where cooperation replaced exploitation, where different species worked together instead of feeding on each other, and, standing at the center of this new order were the humans, the Deathworlders who had learned that the greatest strength comes not from taking, but from giving. Not from fear, but from courage. Not from control, but from freedom. The natural order hadn't been overturned, it had been fulfilled. The night shift on Terra Watch Station was usually quiet. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez sat at her monitoring station, watching the endless stream of data from deep space sensors. For 3 years, she had tracked cargo ships, mapped asteroid fields, and logged routine communications between human colonies. Nothing exciting ever happened during the midnight hours. Tonight felt different. At 0347 hours, her console beeped with an unusual signal. Maya frowned at the display. The transmission was weak and came from a direction where no human ships should be traveling. She adjusted the receivers and tried to clean up the signal. "Computer, run analysis on incoming transmission," she said. "Analysis complete. Signal origin, unknown. Language pattern, unknown. Transmission strength, very weak. Estimated distance, 847 light-years." Maya's coffee grew cold as she worked. 800 light-years was far beyond human space. No human ship had ever traveled that distance. She ran the signal through the translation computer, but it found no matches in any known language database. Hours passed. Maya tried different approaches, adjusting frequencies and running the signal through various filters. Just as her shift was ending, something clicked. The computer found patterns in the alien sounds. "Translation matrix active," the computer announced. "Confidence level 67%. Maya held her breath as words began to appear on her screen. What she read made her blood run cold. "Help us. Please. Anyone who receives this message. We are the Villani of the Andros sector. Our worlds are dying. The Keth came to us in peace. They said they would protect us. We believed them." The message continued, painting a horrible picture. The Villani were a peaceful species who had never known war. They grew food, created art, and lived in harmony with their environment. When the Keth Dominion arrived, the Villani welcomed them as friends. "They lied to us. The protection was slavery. They take our people to work in their mines. Our children disappear in the night. Our cities burn when we resist. We do not know how to fight. We have no weapons, no armies. We only know how to grow things and make them beautiful." Maya's hands shook as she read the coordinates that followed. The Villani were transmitting their exact location, hoping someone, anyone, would help them. "We have sent this message to all frequencies in all directions. If there are good people among the stars, please help us. We are dying. Our species will not survive another year. This may be our last transmission." The signal ended with a sound that needed no translation. It was crying. Maya immediately called her supervisor, Commander Robert Kim. Within minutes, Kim was reading the message over her shoulder. "Are you sure this is real?" he asked. "The computer confirms it's not from any human source. The linguistic patterns are completely alien. Either someone created the most elaborate hoax in history, or we just received our first message from another intelligent species." Kim was quiet for a long moment. "And they're being killed. Systematically murdered," Maya corrected. "This isn't war, it's genocide." Within 2 hours, the message was on Admiral James Park's desk aboard the flagship Independence. Park was a veteran of the Resource Wars, the last major conflict in human space. He had spent the last 20 years working to keep peace between the colonies. Park read the translation 3 times before calling his senior staff. Captain Lisa Chen arrived first, followed by General Marcus Stone and Intelligence Director Alex Thompson. They gathered around the conference table as Park played the alien message. The room was silent when it ended. "Opinions?" Park asked. General Stone spoke first. "It could be a trap. We know nothing about these aliens or their enemies. This Keth Dominion might be the good guys." "Did you hear the same message I did?" Captain Chen asked. "Those weren't the words of conquerors. That was pure terror. Director Thompson pulled up a star chart. The transmission came from here, he said, pointing to a region far beyond human space. 800 light-years away. That's a 6-month journey for our fastest ships. So? Park asked. So if this is a trap, it's the most expensive and elaborate trap ever created. No one travels that far to set up a deception. Park looked at each of his officers. I want honest opinions. Do we help them? Stone shook his head. Admiral, we have responsibilities to our own people. We can't risk human lives for aliens we've never met. We can't ignore genocide, Chen argued. If we have the power to help and we choose not to, what does that make us? Thompson leaned forward. There's another consideration. If the Keth Dominion is powerful enough to destroy an entire species, they might eventually reach human space. Better to fight them now, far from home. Park studied the star chart. The coordinates were in a region humans had never explored. The journey would be dangerous and expensive. Many ships might not return, but the voice in that message haunted him. The desperate hope of a dying species, reaching across impossible distances to ask for help from people they had never met. Computer, connect me to Earth Command, Park ordered. The hologram of Fleet Admiral Sarah Watson appeared above the table. Park played the alien message for her and waited for her response. My God, Watson whispered. How many ships do you need? Ma'am, how many ships do you need to stop this? Park looked at his staff. They were all staring at him with new understanding. The decision had already been made. All of them, Park said. I need every ship we can spare. Admiral Watson nodded. You'll have them. I'll send word to all sectors. Any captain who wants to volunteer for this mission will be accepted. As the meeting ended, Park remained at the conference table, staring at the coordinates of a species he had never met. In 6 hours, those coordinates would be transmitted to every human military base, every colony, every corporate headquarters. Humanity was about to learn that they were not alone in the universe, and that some of their new neighbors needed help. The sleeping giant was beginning to wake. The message spread through human space like wildfire. Within 6 hours of Admiral Park's announcement, every major news network was broadcasting the alien distress call. The translation played over and over, each repetition driving home the same terrible truth. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, an entire species was being murdered. Captain Lisa Chen stood in the massive hangar bay of the Titan shipyards, watching her crew work on the dreadnought Retribution. The huge warship had been in mothballs for 40 years, its weapon systems powered down and its crew quarters empty. Now it buzzed with activity as engineers worked around the clock to bring it back to life. Captain, called Chief Engineer Tom Walsh, wiping oil from his hands. Main engines are online. Weapon systems will be ready in 12 hours. Chen nodded. The Retribution was one of 12 dreadnoughts being pulled from storage across human space. These massive ships had been built during the resource wars, designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. They had done their job too well. Peace had lasted so long that most people forgot such weapons existed. How's the crew situation? Chen asked. Better than expected. We have 300 volunteers for every position. Half are veterans who came out of retirement. The other half are civilians who want to help. Chen wasn't surprised. The alien message had touched something deep in the human psyche. The idea of an innocent species being destroyed simply because they were weak and peaceful had triggered an almost universal response. Humans understood bullies, and they knew how to deal with them. On the factory world of New Pittsburgh, production lines that had been making civilian goods for decades suddenly switched to military equipment. Plant manager Jack Rivers watched as his workers modified assembly robots to produce ammunition instead of household appliances. How long until we're at full military production? He asked his supervisor. 72 hours, sir. The workers are pulling double shifts without being asked. Some haven't gone home since the announcement. Rivers looked out at the factory floor. Men and women who had never seen combat were working with desperate efficiency to build weapons for a war they would never fight. They were doing it for people they would never meet, on worlds they would never see. The same scene was playing out across human space. On mining worlds, crews extracted materials for ship armor. On research stations, Scientists worked to improve weapon designs. Even the luxury cruise ships of the passenger lines were volunteering to serve as hospital ships and supply vessels. Admiral Park watched the mobilization reports with amazement. In 48 hours, humanity had transformed from a peaceful trading civilization into a military machine. The speed of the change was unprecedented in galactic history. "Admiral," said Director Thompson, entering the command center with a data pad. "Latest volunteer numbers." Park read the report and shook his head. 12 million people have volunteered for military service? We don't have ships for 12 million people. That's just the first wave. Applications are still coming in. Every colony wants to send ships. Even the corporate security forces are offering their services. Park looked at the tactical display showing human space. Red dots marked the locations of ships being prepared for the mission. There were hundreds of them, from massive dreadnoughts to small patrol vessels. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. General Stone entered the command center carrying his own set of reports. "Admiral, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The good kind. We have too many volunteers and not enough transport capacity. Every Marine regiment wants to join the mission. Even the planetary defense forces are asking to come along." Park smiled grimly. "Pick the best units. Leave enough forces to defend our own worlds, but take everyone else." On the agricultural world of New Eden, Farmer Mike Johnson loaded grain into transport containers. His entire harvest was being donated to feed the military mission. Around him, other farmers were doing the same thing. "Why are we doing this?" asked his neighbor Helen Parker. "These aliens aren't our responsibility." Mike paused in his work. "My grandfather fought in the resource wars. He told me stories about what happened when good people stood by and did nothing. He said the universe has two kinds of people, those who help and those who watch others suffer." Helen nodded and continued loading grain. The conversation was happening everywhere in human space. Parents were explaining to children why their fathers and mothers were leaving to fight for strangers. Teachers were showing students where the Volani worlds were located on star charts. Captain David Martinez commanded the heavy cruiser Vengeance, another ship pulled from mothballs. He stood on his bridge watching his crew run system checks. Most of them were young, too young to remember the last war, but they worked with the intensity of veterans. "Captain," said his communications officer, "we're receiving a message from the Lunar Naval Academy." "Put it through." The face of Admiral Rebecca Hayes appeared on the main screen. She had been Martinez's instructor 20 years ago, and now she was superintendent of the academy. "David, I'm sending you 50 of our best cadets. They graduate today, 6 months early. They want to serve on your ship." Martinez was surprised. "Admiral, these kids have never seen combat. Neither have most of your crew. But they've been watching the alien message for 3 days. They understand what's at stake. Take them, David. They're ready." As the call ended, Martinez looked at his tactical officer. "Lieutenant, how many ships are joining the mission?" "Latest. Count as 837 vessels, sir. Everything from dreadnoughts to supply ships. It's the largest fleet in human history." Martinez felt a chill of pride and fear. Pride in his species for responding so quickly to help strangers. Fear of what they might face in the darkness between stars. On Earth, in the halls of government, politicians debated the wisdom of the mission. Some argued that humanity should focus on its own problems. Others pointed out that genocide was everyone's problem. The debate ended when the video messages started arriving. Veterans of past conflicts, speaking directly to the cameras, explaining why they were coming out of retirement. Factory workers explaining why they were working without pay. Farmers explaining why they were donating their crops. The message was always the same. This was what humanity did. When innocent people cried for help, humans answered. Admiral Park received the final mobilization report 3 days after the alien message arrived. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 1,000 ships of all sizes, 3 million personnel, enough supplies to sustain operations for 2 years. But the most important number was different. It wasn't about ships or weapons or supplies, it was about hope. For the first time in decades, humanity had a purpose that went beyond profit or politics. They were going to save a species they had never met, in a place they had never been, simply because it was the right thing to do. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and it was angry. 6 months later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Volani territory. What they found was worse than the distress call had described. Commander Alex Thompson stood on the bridge of the stealth frigate Ghostwalker, staring at the tactical display in horror. Entire star systems showed the signature of dead worlds. Planets that once supported billions of Volani now registered as barren rock. "How many?" he asked his sensor operator. 17 worlds completely stripped. "Sir? No life signs detected. The Keth have been busy." Thompson clenched his fists. The journey had taken 6 months. During that time, the Keth had continued their systematic destruction of Volani civilization. Millions more had died while humanity traveled across the void. Admiral Park received Thompson's report aboard the flagship Independence. The bridge. Crew listened in silence as Thompson described world after world reduced to empty stone. "Any sign of survivors?" Park asked. "Yes, sir. We're detecting Volani life signs on 12 remaining worlds. But they're heavily guarded by Keth forces. It looks like they're being used as labor camps." Park studied the tactical display. The Keth fleet was massive, at least 3 times larger than the human force. Their ships were sleek and advanced, clearly designed by a species that had been building warships for centuries. But Park had learned something during his years of military service. Size wasn't everything. Sometimes the smaller force won because they wanted victory more than their enemy wanted to fight. "Thompson, I want detailed intelligence on Keth military doctrine. How do they fight? What are their weaknesses?" "Already. On it, Admiral. Give me 48 hours. The Ghostwalker and 5 other stealth ships began their reconnaissance mission. They moved through the outer systems like shadows, observing Keth operations without being detected. What they discovered changed everything. Thompson returned to the Independence with a complete analysis of Keth military tactics. He stood before Park and the senior staff, presenting his findings. "The Keth fight like a civilized species," he began. "Their battles are formal, almost ritualistic. They line up their ships, exchange fire at long range, and the side with superior technology wins. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't follow the same rules." General Stone leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "They don't understand guerrilla warfare. They've never dealt with an enemy that strikes from hiding, uses deception, or targets non-military assets. The concept is completely foreign to them." Captain Chen smiled grimly. "They've never fought humans." Park nodded. "Then we'll teach them. Thompson, I want you to begin harassment operations immediately. Hit their supply lines, disrupt their communications, make them afraid of the dark." The human campaign began not with a great battle, but with whispers in the night. Keth supply convoys started disappearing without a trace. Ships that should have arrived at their destinations simply vanished. The crews were never found, but their cargo containers were discovered floating in space, completely empty. Captain Rodriguez commanded the destroyer Silent Strike. Her ship specialized in stealth operations, moving unseen through enemy territory. She watched through her periscope as a Keth supply convoy approached. "Target the lead ship," she ordered. "Magnetic mines, minimal explosion signature." The mines attached to the Keth vessel's hull and waited. Hours later, when the convoy reached its destination, the lead ship simply broke apart. The explosion looked like an engine failure. The other Keth ships had no idea they were under attack. The pattern repeated across Keth territory. Supply ships suffered mysterious accidents. Communication relays went offline for no apparent reason. Isolated outposts reported strange sounds, in the night followed by missing personnel. The psychological effect was immediate. Keth commanders began requesting additional security. Supply runs that once took days now took weeks as ships traveled in large, heavily guarded groups. General Marcus Stone coordinated the ground operations from the assault ship Thunderbolt. His special forces teams were already on several Keth-occupied worlds, gathering intelligence and preparing for larger operations. "Sir," reported Colonel Emma Davis over the secure channel, "we've identified the main labor camp on Volani Prime. Approximately 50,000 Volani prisoners, guarded by 2,000 Keth soldiers. Can you extract them?" "Not all at once, but we can start picking away at the edges. The Keth guards follow predictable patterns. They're not used to dealing with prisoners who might have allies. Davis led her team through the underground tunnels beneath the labor camp. The Villani had been forced to dig extensive mining operations, creating a network of passages the Keth didn't fully understand. It was perfect for infiltration. Her team emerged inside the camp during the night shift change. While the guards were distracted, they cut through the fence of one prisoner compound and led 30 Villani to freedom through the tunnels. The escape wasn't discovered until morning. By then, Davis and her team were already miles away, guiding the rescued Villani to a hidden base in the mountains. The Keth response was swift and brutal. They executed 50 prisoners as punishment for the escape, but the psychological damage was done. The Villani prisoners now knew that help had arrived. Word spread through the camp network. The mysterious humans were real. Admiral Park escalated the campaign after receiving reports of the executions. The time for subtle harassment was over. All ships, this is Admiral Park. The Keth have chosen to murder prisoners rather than improve their security. They will learn that actions have consequences. Begin Operation Payback. The human fleet struck at Keth military installations across 3 star systems simultaneously. But these weren't the formal naval battles the Keth expected. Human ships appeared from unexpected angles, struck hard, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Captain Chen led the Retribution and 6 other heavy cruisers in an attack on a Keth naval base. Instead of the expected frontal assault, they approached from below the system's plane, using the gravitational field of a gas giant to mask their approach. The Keth defenders were caught completely off guard. Their ships were arranged for a traditional, long-range engagement, not for enemies attacking from directly underneath them. All batteries fire at will, Chen ordered. The human ships unleashed everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, and kinetic projectiles tore through the Keth formation. 3 enemy ships were destroyed before they could even raise their shields. But Chen wasn't finished. As the surviving Keth ships tried to regroup, she ordered something that shocked both sides. Ramming speed. Target the command ship. Their Narration accelerated directly toward the largest Keth vessel. At the last second, Chen fired every weapon she had and pulled away. The command ship, crippled by the weapons fire and unprepared for such an insane tactic, was destroyed. The surviving Keth ships retreated in confusion. They had never faced enemies willing to risk their own destruction to achieve victory. Similar attacks occurred throughout Keth space. Human commanders used tactics that civilized species considered barbaric. Suicide runs, boarding actions, and the deliberate targeting of command structures. The Keth fleet began to pull back, consolidating their forces around their most important worlds. For the first time in their military history, they were afraid. Admiral Park received intelligence reports showing the enemy's confusion. Keth commanders were sending increasingly desperate messages to their superiors, trying to explain how their technologically superior forces were being defeated by primitive humans. The reports all contained the same theme. These humans fought like demons with no regard for their own safety. They used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Park smiled as he read the reports. The Keth were beginning to understand what they had awakened. They had made the mistake of murdering innocents in front of humans. Now they would learn why that was never a good idea. The hunt had begun. The war had been raging for 3 months when the Keth finally understood what they were fighting. The realization came too late. Colonel Emma Davis crouched in the ruins of a Villani city, watching Keth patrols through her scope. The labor camp, rescue operations had evolved into something much larger. Her team now had 200 Villani volunteers working with them, former prisoners who had learned to fight from their human rescuers. "The supply depot is heavily guarded," whispered Beck, a young Villani who had lost his entire family to the Keth. 40 soldiers, automated defenses, force fields. Davis studied the target. A traditional military assault would be costly and probably fail, but humans didn't think like traditional military forces. "We don't attack the depot," she said. "We make it attack itself." That night, Davis and her team infiltrated the Keth facility through the waste disposal system. The alien soldiers, like most civilized species, found the idea of crawling through sewage pipes so disgusting they never guarded them properly. Her demolitions expert, Sergeant Mike Torres, planted charges throughout the facility's power grid. Not enough to destroy the base, but enough to cause critical system failures. When the power goes out, their force fields will drop for exactly 90 seconds before backup generators kick in, Torres explained to the Volani volunteers. That's your window. The attack began at dawn. The explosions cut power to the depot just as the morning shift was changing. In the confusion, Beck and his team rushed through the disabled force fields and destroyed the ammunition storage. The explosion was visible from orbit. Davis watched the mushroom cloud rise above the depot and spoke into her radio. Command, this is Ground Team 7. Target destroyed. No human casualties. 15 Volani volunteers rescued. The pattern repeated across a dozen worlds. Human Special Forces teams, working with rescued Volani, struck at Keth installations using tactics that defied conventional military wisdom. They turned the enemy's technology against them, used their own supply systems as weapons, and disappeared into civilian populations before retaliation could arrive. In space, Captain Chen was teaching the Keth fleet an equally harsh lesson. The ease, Retribution led a wolf pack of human destroyers against a Keth convoy carrying Volani prisoners to another labor camp. Sir, reported her tactical officer, enemy convoy consists of 6 transport ships and 12 escort vessels. They're requesting our surrender. Chen almost laughed. The Keth still believed that superior numbers guaranteed victory. They had never faced enemies who viewed impossible odds as merely challenging. Signal the fleet. Attack pattern Echo 7. Target the escort ships first. The human ships split into 3 groups attacking from different directions simultaneously. The Keth escorts found themselves fighting on multiple fronts, unable to concentrate their firepower effectively. But Chen's real target wasn't the escorts. While they were distracted, she took the Retribution directly toward the prisoner transports. Instead of destroying them, she executed a maneuver that shocked both sides. Prepare boarding pods, she ordered. Sir, boarding a ship in the middle of a battle is insane? Yes, do it anyway. The Retribution launched 20 boarding pods directly at the largest transport ship. The Keth crew, expecting long-range combat, was completely unprepared for hand-to-hand fighting in their own corridors. Lieutenant Jackson led the boarding party through the transport ship's passages. The Keth soldiers they encountered were excellent marksmen and disciplined fighters, but they had never faced humans in close combat. These aliens fight like they're afraid of getting hurt, Jackson reported over his comm. They pull back when we charge. They don't understand that sometimes you have to take damage to win. Within an hour, all 6 transport ships were under human control. 5,000 Volani prisoners were freed, and the Keth escort fleet was destroyed or scattered. Admiral Park received reports of victories throughout Keth space, but he knew the real battle was yet to come. Intelligence indicated that the Keth main fleet was massing near their homeworld for a final confrontation. Admiral, reported Director Thompson, Keth fleet strength is estimated at over 300 ships. Our force is barely 100 vessels. Park studied the tactical display. The numbers were daunting, but he had learned something important about the Keth during the past months. They were a species that had become too comfortable with victory. They had forgotten that war was ultimately about will, not just weapons. Sir, added Thompson, we're receiving communications from other species in Keth space. Apparently our campaign has inspired several rebellion movements. The Keth are fighting on multiple fronts now. Park nodded. That was exactly what he had hoped for. The Keth had built their empire on fear and technological superiority, but fear only worked when your enemies believed you were invincible. The human fleet had shattered that illusion. General Stone joined them in the command center, carrying reports from ground operations. Admiral, we've liberated 47 prison camps and freed over 2 million Volani, but we're also receiving disturbing intelligence about Keth intentions. What kind of intelligence? They're planning to destroy the remaining Volani worlds rather than lose them to us. Complete planetary sterilization. If they can't have slaves, they'll settle for genocide. Park felt cold anger settle in his chest. The Keth were about to cross a line that would seal their fate. Threatening to murder entire worlds was exactly the kind of behavior that turned humans from soldiers into something much more dangerous. How long before they can execute this plan? 72 hours. They're moving their planet-killer weapons into position now. Park looked at his senior staff. These men and women had become his family during the long campaign. They had shared victories and losses, hopes and fears. Now they faced their greatest challenge. Gentlemen, ladies, it seems the Keth want to teach us what true evil looks like. I suggest we show them what righteous fury can accomplish. He turned to the communications officer. Send a message to all ships. Operation Final Justice is now active. We end this war in the next 72 hours. The message spread through the human fleet with electric intensity. Every captain, every crew member understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about military victory anymore. This was about preventing genocide on a scale that would shame the entire galaxy. Captain Rodriguez received the message aboard her destroyer and immediately began preparations for the most desperate mission of her career. Her ship would be part of the advance force, tasked with reaching the Keth homeworld before the planet-killer weapons could be deployed. "Sir," asked her navigation officer, "the route to the Keth homeworld goes through their heaviest defenses. We'll be outnumbered 50-1. Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Those are better odds than the Alamo." Her crew didn't understand the reference, but they understood her tone. They were going to fight impossible odds because that's what humans did when innocent lives were at stake. Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Human commanders explaining to their crews why they were about to attempt the impossible, why they were going to charge directly into the teeth of the enemy's strongest defenses. The answer was always the same: because someone had to. The Keth had made their final mistake. They had threatened to commit genocide in front of humans. Now they would learn why that was never survivable. The final battle was about to begin. The final battle began in the darkness between stars, 70 hours before the Keth planet-killer weapons would fire. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Independence, watching the tactical display as his fleet approached the Keth home system. 300 enemy ships waited in defensive formations around their homeworld. The humans had barely 100 vessels, many damaged from previous battles. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, "the Keth fleet commander is requesting our surrender. He says resistance is hopeless against such overwhelming numbers." Park almost smiled. Even now, facing complete destruction, the Keth still believed that numbers determined victory. They had learned nothing from months of defeats. "Send a reply," Park ordered. "Tell him that humans don't surrender when innocent lives are at stake. Tell him his planet-killer weapons will never fire." The human fleet split into 5 attack groups, each targeting a different section of the Keth defensive line. It was a desperate strategy that violated every principle of naval warfare, but desperation had served humanity well in this war. "Captain," Chen led the first wave aboard the Retribution. Her battle group consisted of 20 heavily damaged ships, all volunteers for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Their job was to punch through the Keth lines and reach the planet-killer stations before they could fire. "All ships, this is Chen," she broadcast to her group. "We're going to do something the Keth will never expect. We're going to win through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness." The Retribution accelerated toward the enemy formation at maximum speed. Keth ships opened fire at long range, their energy weapons designed for precise, efficient destruction. But Chen's ships didn't follow normal combat patterns. Instead of maintaining formation and exchanging fire at safe distances, the human vessels charged directly into the enemy fleet. They took terrible damage, but they also caused something the Keth had never experienced: panic. "Sir," reported Chen's tactical officer, "the Keth ships are pulling back. They don't know how to handle enemies who fight at close range." Chen watched as enemy vessels tried to retreat while maintaining their firing positions. The maneuver was impossible, and several Keth ships collided with each other in the confusion. "All batteries, target their command ship," Chen ordered. The Retribution, its hull glowing from energy weapon impacts, fired everything it had at the largest Keth vessel. The enemy ship's shields held, but Chen wasn't finished. Prepare for ramming speed. Her crew stared at her in shock. Ramming was considered a last resort, used only when a ship was already doomed. Sir, we can still fight, protested her executive officer. This isn't about fighting anymore, Chen replied. This is about sending a message. The retribution accelerated toward the Keth command ship. At the last moment, Chen fired every missile and energy weapon she had, then pulled away just enough to avoid complete destruction. The Keth ship, unprepared for such an insane tactic, suffered catastrophic damage. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships used tactics that civilized species considered barbaric: ramming attacks, boarding actions in the middle of space battles, and the deliberate sacrifice of vessels to achieve tactical objectives. Colonel Davis watched the space battle from the surface of the Keith homeworld, where her Special Forces team had infiltrated the Planet Killer Control Center. Around her, 50 human Marines prepared for their final mission. The control center is underground, protected by force fields and automated defenses, she explained to her team. We have one chance to disable the weapons before they fire. Sergeant Torres checked his explosives. What about extraction? Davis looked at him honestly. There won't be any extraction. This is a one-way mission. The Marines nodded calmly. They had all volunteered for this operation knowing the odds. They were fighting not for glory or conquest, but to prevent the murder of an entire species. The infiltration began through the planet's sewer system, just as it had on a dozen other worlds. The Keth still hadn't learned to guard their waste disposal networks, a blind spot that had cost them dearly throughout the war. Davis and her team emerged inside the control center, just as the planet killer weapons began their final charging sequence. Keth technicians worked frantically at their stations, preparing to commit genocide on an unprecedented scale. 60 seconds until firing sequence, announced the facility's computer in the Keth language. Davis didn't hesitate. She and her team opened fire on the control stations, causing explosions throughout the facility. Keth security forces responded quickly, but they found themselves fighting humans in close quarters. Torres reached the main power coupling and began placing his charges. This will destroy the entire facility, he warned. Do it, Davis ordered, while firing at Keth soldiers advancing down the corridor. The explosions began in the facility's power core and spread outward. Within minutes, the planet killer weapons were offline, their charging sequence permanently disrupted. Davis's team didn't survive the explosion, but their sacrifice saved billions of lives. In space, the battle reached its climax as Admiral Park led the main fleet against the remaining Keth forces. The enemy was in full retreat, their formation broken by human tactics they couldn't understand. Admiral, reported his communications officer, we're receiving surrender requests from multiple Keth ships. Park felt no satisfaction in the victory. Too many humans had died to reach this moment, but the war was finally over. Accept their surrenders, he ordered, and send immediate relief ships to all Vallani worlds. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true cost of the Keth Empire. 17 worlds had been completely stripped of life. Billions of Vallani had died before humanity arrived. The survivors, rescued from labor camps and hidden settlements, numbered fewer than 50 million, but they were alive. 6 months later, Admiral Park stood in the newly constructed Vallani Memorial Station, built in orbit around their homeworld. The station served as both a monument to the dead and a symbol of hope for the survivors. Beck, the young Vallani who had fought alongside Colonel Davis, now served as liaison between his people and the human fleet. He had learned to speak English during the war, and his words carried the weight of his species' gratitude. Admiral, he said, my people want to know why you came. Why you risked everything for strangers you had never met. Park looked out at the stars, thinking of all the human ships that would never return home. Because someone had to, he said simply. Because watching evil succeed is the same as helping it. The memorial station had become something more than anyone expected. Representatives from a dozen species had arrived, all seeking human protection from various threats. The galaxy had learned that there was a new power among the stars, one that fought not for conquest, but for justice. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, now promoted to admiral, commanded the 1st Joint Human-Villani Patrol Fleet. As she reviewed reports of other species requesting help, she realized that humanity had found its role in the galaxy. They were the guardians who woke when others could not protect themselves. The Keth Dominion was gone, its empire dissolved, and its leaders facing trial for genocide. The surviving Keth civilians were learning to live without slaves, slowly rebuilding their society under human supervision. But the most important change was in the galaxy itself. For the first time in millennia, innocent species had someone to call when darkness threatened. The human fleet patrolled the void, watching and waiting. The Deathworlders were no longer sleeping, and the galaxy would never be the same.